And joining us now with more, Victoria de Francesco Soto, the Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service at the University of Arkansas. She is an MSNBC political analyst, and Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. So, Victoria, tonight, the president is going to address the party that pressured him essentially to drop from the race just about a month ago. What does tonight represent for him?
Tonight, we've heard a lot of talk about passing the baton, so I think there's that. But I also think it's doing it with grace and fortitude. In addition to showing that he is a team player, that he has the best interest of the country in mind, this is also such an important opportunity, Jose, for him to tout what he has done, that he has laid the foundational policy work over the last 4 years to be able to catapult Kamala Harris into the position that we now see. So I think it's accepting that there was this transition, but also a moment to reflect and tout all of those wins that because of the policy lag, you may get a policy passed, but it takes a little bit for the policies to be seen and felt. He can really dig down into that and do so in bringing the Democratic family together.
I mean, Christina, well, the latest polling shows the vice president making gains nationally. She's still trailing Trump on some key issues, the economy and immigration. What does this week represent for her efforts to chip away at Trump's lead on these issues?
Well, keep in mind, as Mike laid out, it hasn't even been a month, Jose. So the DNC is going to do two things. One, it's going to reintroduce Kamala Harris to the American public. You know, as Vicky just said, lay out the policy wins of the Biden-Harris administration and then pass the baton. But in the post-DNC, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, don't forget, she actually chose a VP who could be an asset to her on the campaign trail. She will then most likely lay out a real policy prescriptive that we haven't yet seen and that people are clamoring for. But I wouldn't be surprised if she had sort of the equivalent of Obama's big Philadelphia speech, where it was his big race speech, and it really shifted how people saw his vision of the country. If we see Kamala Harris link her biography to the border, to immigration, to how it relates to the economy, her middle-class upbringing, we've seen that in some of the big speeches that she's given, but we will probably see a lot more specific policies post-DNC that will help the American voter make a clearer decision as to who she is.
Do you think that's going to be post-DNC, that she's going to lay out some detailed policy positions? Or could this week, although she was only speaking once, but could this week be a week where some other policy positions are inaugurated?
Right. I think a lot of the surrogates will sort of start to bridge things together. Her speech, though, to not just the Democratic Party, but to the American public, will reintroduce herself to them. Don't forget, she's been here for 3+ years, but a lot of people, that's the role of the vice presidency. Most people don't pay attention very closely, and they're not responsible for a lot of things at the top of the ticket. So she'll do many things in her speech on Thursday night, but post-DNC is where we'll start to get into the minutiae and the details with what some of the voters are really clamoring for.
And I'm wondering what you think that how difficult is it for her, Victoria, to separate herself from some of the Biden record, and how difficult is it going forward for her to say, even though I was the vice president and didn't have much responsibility, as Christina says, that is something that I should be credited with?
Right. And that is such a difficult position, right? Because she did spend the last 4 years in the White House. But I think really it comes down to the skill of framing. And I think taking a differentiated frame in terms of the big picture. So whereas, Joe Biden, during his convention speech 4 years ago, was focused on democracy, on darkness and lightness. Here, we see that Kamala Harris is most likely going to be focused on the future. So I think that is one piece where it's related, but it's different. I think in terms of the economy, letting Joe Biden set up the win, but then letting Kamala Harris and her team talk about the tangibles about what this means. So we got the pharmaceutical negotiations going. But you know what? This is what it's going to mean in your pocketbook. This is what it's going to mean in your day-to-day. So I think it's doing that. And when she gets hit with immigration, when she gets hit with the economy, to dig in and say, you know what? This is how it's broken, and this is how I'm going to fix it. So you have to confront it head on, because if not, the Republicans are going to frame it for you. So I think she really has to be strong and on the offensive on these immigration and economy pieces.
Yeah, and I mean, Christina, the other big issue tonight, we're going to be hearing from 3 women who were placed in medical peril because of state abortion bans. What does this tell you about the role reproductive rights is going to be playing in Harris's campaign?
As I've said before, and I keep saying, Emily's List has shown us when abortion is on the ballot, Democrats win. And so, unlike J.D. Vance, who says women don't want to talk about that, they care about pocketbook issues, and Vicki and I as political scientists know voters go to the polls based on pocketbook issues. The Democrats can easily say, well, forcing a woman to have a child that she's not prepared for is a pocketbook issue. Forcing a family to have a child they're not prepared for is a pocketbook issue. But also, if we're moving away from the moral conversation as to whether or not abortion should be legal or not, let's go to the constitutional question. Should the government allow a woman to choose autonomy over her own body? And hearing from 3 women who have real stories, which represent millions of women and young women across the country and families across the country who've had to make very difficult decisions, this is a way of bringing a very important moral, constitutional, and economic issue into the fore and not being afraid to talk about it, because when Democrats talk about it, they win elections.
This has been a very good 3 weeks for Vice President Harris. Do you think that momentum will, obviously there's a bump that comes from the convention, but is this something that she can carry through until November?
Time will tell. However, there are some great signs. The Electoral College math is complicated for Democrats, right? I don't think anyone's confused as to whether or not Democrats can win the popular vote as they have for the past several elections. However, the surrogates are on message. Tim Walz, a fantastic VP choice who connects with people. As an educator, I may be a little biased, but we know that he can get out there and naturally talk to people about issues that have affected his family and wins that he's had as governor, as an executive of a state. Mind you now, he's the third Minnesotan as a VP choice, which, you know, as luck would have us, is great for the Democrats. So I think there may be a bit of a drop-off, obviously, over time, but they're in good stead right now.
Minnesota, the land of VP choices and tickets, but also, more importantly, the land of Prince.
Oh, that's all we need to know.
That's all. Victoria DeFrancesco Soto and Christina Greer, it's great seeing you both.